Okay, first of all, Fáilte Róg Galéir, welcome to the Technological University Dublin, and indeed to this presentation on the MSc in Food Safety Management. We are delighted to have you join us in this presentation, and we've been running the programme for the last 21 years. Seems like a long time, and it is indeed, and it's been successfully run. And that we now have hundreds of food safety managers, graduates of the programme indeed, who are working in the food industry all over the country. And they have been making food safer for consumers and indeed making the food industry safer successfully for the last 21 years. As you can see, it's run both full-time and part-time, and I'll give you more details about that a little bit later. This presentation is about 15 minutes long. We'll record it so you can look back at it later, and I'll allow some time for questions afterwards if you have any, but they won't be recorded. Okay, so let's look first of all at why there is the need for food safety management graduates. And there's a very nice quote from a guy called Dr. Ben Chapman from the University of Guelph in Canada. And he said that there's an increased need for competent graduates with food safety specialties to enter the workforce into industry or regulatory positions. Our generation of scientists will be charged with building safer systems to protect public health and charged with laying the foundations for everyone along the farm to fork continuum to engage in food safety dialogue. And in a nutshell, that's it. We're looking at those who are working in industry or regulating industry, ensuring that we have safer food right throughout the food chain. Why is it important to study food safety management now? Well, again, a nice quote, knowledge is what we will do for a living in the 21st century. Everything is getting technologically much more advanced, and that includes food processing and the whole food industry. Because all of the stuff that we have on our mobile phone that would select stuff and so on and be very whizzy, the very same thing and more is happening in the food industry. So we're getting much more precise in how we do. So when you buy that steak in wherever you're buying your steak in a package, it has been laser cut and it'll be exactly the right size and shaped in a particular way. And that's technology, and the knowledge of that technology and ensuring that it's safe is what we're going to do in the 21st century. We also need to look at things like emerging pathogens. 4 years ago, in 2018, none of us had heard of COVID. It hadn't evolved. There was no COVID. But now we can see for the past 3 years, indeed, it has dominated our lives. So we can see that new pathogens can emerge, and new pathogens can emerge for the food industry also. And we can see this with something like E. coli. E. coli used to be a pathogen, it used to be a bacteria that lived in the guts of animals, and it was harmless. It basically indicated that you got poor hygiene, you weren't washing your hands after going to the loo or whatever. But it mutated, and now we have verotoxin producing E. coli, and these are nasties and cause us to become very ill. These would be things like E. coli 0104 and 0157 and so on. So new things are coming. BSE, again, that had never occurred in beef before, and suddenly we have mad cow disease. Avian flu is a constant worry, as is swine flu, which is a major problem in the pig industry in Ireland and indeed internationally. New technology is also deriving all the time. We've got things like high pressure processing, pulse electric fields, whole genome sequencing, sensor technology, big data analytics. These are all coming in, and so it's new. This is new information and new technology that you, working in the food industry, are going to need to know about to keep ahead, because it's a very competitive world out there. And if you don't know about it, so when your competitor does, you're going to be knocked out of business. We also have changing consumer knowledge and needs. Consumers are changing in terms of lifestyle. They're looking for more convenience, less time when they get in from work in the evening after a long commute perhaps. They want food that they can take out of the fridge and slap in the microwave, but that food has to be safe. And it would be your job as a food safety manager to ensure that that food is going to be safe for the customer. You also have to take into account that a lot of customers are not knowledgeable about food safety risks. They just don't understand what goes wrong. They can't see bacteria, so they don't understand that these things are dangerous. So mixing up things like best before date and use by date is a major source of food being thrown away incorrectly. About 10% of food, in fact, has been chucked because people mix up the two of them. And how do we get that information across? Again, we've got new and changing food safety management systems in terms of legislation. Food fraud, which showed up during the horse meat crisis, where lots of horses were the horse meat, mince was sold as beef, but it was in fact horse meat. And that caused a whole raft of new legislation in terms of new official controls, legislation from the EU, which you would have to implement and understand. Things like food packaging material, when you wrap food in packaging, you need to control what comes out of the packaging into your food. Labelling is constantly changing in terms of legislation. There's now a whole new raft of legislation on the way in terms of front of pack labelling to warn people about the nutritional and the health of the foods that they're buying. That's to encourage customers to buy healthier food and to live healthier lifestyles. Sustainability is the current all-important word. And when we look at a planet that's going to have problems unless we change what we do, we need to produce food more sustainably. We're currently throwing out over a third of the food that goes on the supermarket shelf that's ready to be sold. 1/3 of that or more is thrown in the bin. That's not sustainable. And we need to look at systems to overcome that. And that's what you will be studying. Things like pesticide regulations are getting more stringent. Allergens are becoming a major problem in that about 5% of the population is subject to some kind of an allergen, and that's rising over time in terms of children particularly. And we need to produce our food so that it doesn't have allergens, or if they happen to be there, there's warnings on them so that people are not affected by them. In the US, again, they have the Food Safety Modernization Act. Again, that's a whole raft of new legislation. In terms of due diligence, anybody in the food industry needs to not only do the right thing, but be seen to do the right thing, to have documented that they've done the right thing. And that's all part of the due diligence defense if somebody sues you in the food industry. The power of the multiples, the big supermarket chains like SuperValu or Dunn's or Tesco's or Aldi or Lidl or whatever, all of these chains have stringent requirements for food safety. And that's because they don't want their customers being affected by it, and they don't want to be sued for various things. So they have very stringent requirements for food companies in terms of production. Looking at what the aim of the program is and the genesis of the MSc program, where did it come from? Well, what we wanted to do was to facilitate the development of high caliber food safety managers, people who can manage the food safety in the food industry to make sure that it's safe for customers. And it came from the EU White Paper on Food Safety, which came after a major food safety crisis in terms of BSE, or mad cow disease, and indeed dioxin contamination. And we looked at this legislation which was just coming in, and it suggested a whole raft of new legislation. And we decided that we needed to produce somebody who can actually understand and follow and implement this legislation. And hence we launched in 2001. What do we cover in terms of the program? We look, first of all, at chemical and microbial hazards in food, and these would be things like toxins and so on that you might have in food, but also things like additives and contaminants and so on, and physical contaminants you get in food, things like bits of metal or stones or all of these kind of things, how they get in there, and indeed how you keep them out. Microbial hazards, these would be listeria, salmonella, and so on, all of the various microbes that can cause us to become ill, and how do we control them, and then a little bit of research on how we practically put in projects to solve these things. We also look at food regulatory affairs, in other words, food law, and that's changing all the time, as I explained earlier. We also look at consumer behaviour in the media. The consumer really is a very important element in food safety. How they handle the food that gets to them, and how you influence the consumer to be safer in terms of their food is very important. Also in terms of the media, it's very important. So if you have a problem in a food business, you're going to be interviewed. So we would have media training for people on the program so they would know how to write a press release saying we've got a problem, but this is how we're going to solve it. And how you do an interview, so you do mock interviews. So you'll be prepared in case a problem actually does arise. There's also safety aspects of food production technology, and this looks at not just food processing and making sure that we process food safely, but also primary production. So you know where your tomatoes come from and how they're produced and the kind of issues that there might be with them, where your grain, where your beef, where your pulses, all of these things come from and how they're grown, so that you can see what kind of issues there might be in producing these. And finally, then we look at the management of food safety. And this is where we look at, first of all, food safety management systems. And these would be systems such as areas that you would need for a food safety management team. So management skills, how do you manage your food safety management skill? Human resource management, and how do you incentivize and develop good leadership in that team? We also look at health and safety management. We look at environmental management, because again, these are the kind of things that you're going to have to control as a food safety manager. We look at various other systems in terms of management. And then we'll also look at food safety management risk analysis. And everything is based on risk. And we look at how risky something happens to be and what the likely exposure happens to be for it. And then we'll decide on what we're going to do. And in addition to that, we'll have things like auditing. So you need to audit food companies. A lot of people get jobs as auditors. And also HACCP. So we look in detail at how HACCP works and how it's used to control food safety in the food industry. And in terms of food safety management toolkit, these are assignments which will develop your auditing skills, your standard skills, and the auditing checklists that you need for these processes. So those are the theory that we cover, and then we put this all into practice in the integrated food safety management case study. And what this does is that we put you as a team of 4 or 5 people in a food company, and you audit that company to the statutory standard, and you look at what gaps there might be. So, and then you would come up with proposals to close those gaps. And then we'll also look at a higher standard, something like the BRC global standard, because that's what a lot of food companies in Ireland and in the UK would have. And again, we look at a gap analysis on that. And then finally, you do a food safety management dissertation done over the period of your study. And that will look in detail at a particular issue. It'll be your personal research. And this is a great way for you to specialize in one particular area, for example. We've had a lot of success in this and a lot of publications on it, and it's been very good for both those who have studied and indeed for the academia in general, and we get publications out of this. What do we offer? Well, we offer an international curriculum. It's global based. We have students, or have had students from more than 30 countries on the programme. So it's very mixed, and we find out what's happening in other countries. It's very important when we're dealing with globalization, where our food is coming from all over the world. And it's been produced and imported from all over the world. So it's important to understand what's happening in different cultures and so on. We use high-flex delivery, which is the technology we have here in Grangecorman. And this means that we have face-to-face delivery of lectures. We also live stream them, so you can be remotely accessing the live stream. And also we record the lectures, so there's flexibility there in terms of where you're going to be. So for example, we currently have students in Australia, so they can study in Australia looking at the recorded material and then deliver the material online. And also students in West Cork, because it's a long way to travel from West Cork for lectures, but they can live stream them. Or we can face-to-face it again, which that's also good, because that whole class interaction is very useful. We provide a very supportive, a very challenging learning environment. It'll push you. It's hard work. There's a lot of time and effort goes into this, but you're a better person after it, and you'll be a good food safety manager. We're involved very much in project-based learning, so it's very practically orientated. 50% of the program is delivered by experienced industry experts. We'll take in somebody who's working in industry, who is a food safety manager, and they will give a lecture on their particular specialist areas such as seafood food safety. We also have international and national food safety organisation visits. So nationally, we'll visit the EU, what used to be the Food and Veterinary Office in Grange, but we'll also go abroad. Once a year, we do one international visit, which is normally to Belgium, or indeed to Brussels, obviously, because that's where the EU is based. Or indeed, every second year we will travel to either Rome or Geneva, again, which would have significant food safety impacts. So in Geneva, for example, we visited the World Trade Organization, and we visited the World Health Organization. Again, they would be very important in food safety, and you get a picture of where the future is in terms of food safety. We also do various other trips. The program is run over either 1 year full-time or 2 years part-time. As I mentioned, we've got advanced virtual learning atmosphere in our new campus. We deal with small class. We've never had more than 30 in a class. We try to keep it small so that it becomes personalised, where so you get to know your other classmates and we get to know you, and we can tailor the learning to suit you and where you want to go in your career. So it's something which you enjoy, but it's also very important to enjoy your year and to develop friends and so on. I know we have students from years ago who've remained firm friends. That's important. Our programme team, from right throughout TU Dublin and beyond. The top picture is me. And below that is Dr. Amit Jaiswal, and he is co-chair. We co-chair. He runs the full-time programme and I run the part-time programme. Where are we? We're based in our new campus, which we just moved into last September, and it's fabulous. We're in the Central Quad. We're actually based up on the 3rd floor here. And your lectures are going to be actually just about there, looking out that window, and just come in from that lecture. And there's the Greenway Hub, which is our research building, and we're continuing to expand. We've got the East Quad, so it's an amazing, absolutely magnificent campus. Well served by transport links. We have a Lewis that goes directly into the campus, so a lot of bus lines going through, and so it's really good. We're very close to the main Lewis, very close to Houston Station, so it's quite easy to get in and out of. Where do graduates go? So past graduates now work in regulatory positions. So, for example, they might work in the Food Safety Authority or in Board BIA, or if they've already got an environmental health degree, they may work as environmental health officers. They may work as veterinarians. Again, we have quite a lot of veterinarians who want to study the programme to increase their food safety knowledge, and they will work for the Department of Agriculture normally. But they may also work for the EU. We've got a number of people who now work for the EU. Lab analysts, for example, the Public Analyst Lab, or various other laboratories. The Department of Agriculture laboratories, again, we'd have graduates who would work there. And there's also lots of graduates who work as technical management in all of Ireland's major food companies. So food producers, processors, caterers, retailers. So we'd have people in Aramark, in BWG, in Arista, Yummies, that's in Australia, the Carberry, and so on, LaRue's. So we'd have graduates in lots of different areas. What do you need to enter the programme? An honours degree, a 2-1 degree or higher, or equivalent, in a discipline with some relevance to food safety. And we're reasonably flexible on that. So you could have a science degree, but you might also have a catering degree. You also may be a veterinarian, you may be a lawyer, you may have management experience, but it's very important that you would have some work experience. Because that's going to be very beneficial to you working as a manager. So you can actually apply what you're doing, particularly in the part-time programme. So entry can also be considered for candidates who wouldn't have a 2-1 degree, but they would have equivalent in terms of work experience. So if you've worked for 10 years in the food industry, for example, but you don't have an honours degree, we would say, well, those 10 years experience with an interview will be equivalent. So that's what we call the exceptional entry process. So we will consider people from lots of different areas. Further information you can pick up from either myself, Fintan Moran, or or Dr. Amit Chaithwal, who are co-chairs of the programme, and you can catch us in Central Quad by sending us an email or phoning us or looking at the website there. Or you can, that QR code will also bring you in there. So, Galir, thank you very much for your attention, and I'll take any questions you have now. And at this point, I'll turn off the recording.